Okay, good afternoon everyone. I hope you've been enjoying today. My talk is probably the last of the science talks, and it's on a topic we're very passionate about. It's whether or not we can prevent MS. The bad news is that MS is on the rise. Studies have shown that 3 times as many women are diagnosed with MS today as they were 50 years ago. Now, obviously this can't continue and we need to do something about it now. To prevent MS, you need to know what causes the disease. Now, we talked about this today a little bit. So we don't know the exact cause of MS. However, over the last decade or so, applied for MS, and it's likely that the interaction of these risk factors that leads to the development of MS. Now, twin studies are useful to try and understand the cause of MS. So if we have a genetically identical twin of an MS patient, their risk for MS is about 30%. And so this is in comparison to a normal sibling or a non-identical twin who shares 50% of their genes with an MS patient, whose risk is about 3 to 5%. So clearly, the more genes you have in common with an MS patient, the higher the risk of disease. But the fact that a genetically identical twin, so that someone who has exactly the same genes, does not have 100% risk, illustrates the importance of other factors. So we like to say that MS is caused by genes and environment. Now, environment is a broad term for anything else other than genetics. So it could be behaviour, it could be diet, it could be climate. Developments in technology have enabled us to pretty much find every gene involved in MS. However, for studies of disease prevention, we can't really use this because we can't really change the genes that you inherit. Now, you've probably seen this map or similar versions. The most striking illustration of the importance of the environment in MS is its geographical distribution. So MS is relatively rare in Africa and Asia, but more common in temperate climates such as the UK, Northern Europe, Canada, US, and Australia and New Zealand. And MS becomes more common the further you are away from the equator, both north and south. Now, I've got here the distribution of MS in France. So the MS prevalence in France has been studied in extensive detail, so every region has a prevalence figure. And so I've now colour-coded the map of France in terms of MS prevalence. So blue colour indicates a high MS prevalence, and orange colour indicates a low MS prevalence, and green somewhere in between. So clearly there's a north-south gradient, so MS is more frequent in the northern parts of France. Now, if I was to show you the distribution of MS in the UK or the US, it looked pretty similar. Now, what does this north-south gradient mean? Well, the most consistent correlation is the amount of sunlight. So now here's the map of France, again, but this time colour-coded in terms of the amount of sunlight it receives. So blue colour indicates a low amount of sunlight, orange colour indicates a high amount of sunlight, and green, again, somewhere in between. So there's a strong correlation between the amount of sunlight and MS prevalence. So the more sunlight you get, the lower the MS prevalence is. A study's been done on the month of birth of MS patients, and this wasn't just for astrology, it's just trying to see if there's any early life factors involved in MS. So what was found was that more MS patients were born in May, and less MS patients were born in November. And so we also think this is sunlight related as well. And we say this because if a mum is pregnant over the winter and delivers in May, she has less sunlight exposure than a mum who's pregnant over the summer and delivers in November.